The morning started like any other Tuesday in Seoul. Office workers rushed to catch buses, students hurried to classes, and street vendors prepared their breakfast stalls. Then the sky changed. Massive black ships, each one bigger than a city, appeared above the world's major cities without any warning. The ships were so huge they blocked out the sun. Casting dark shadows across entire neighborhoods, Commander Vextal stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking down at the tiny humans below. He had done this 47 times before, on 47 different worlds. First came the fear, then the panic, then the desperate pleas for mercy. Finally came surrender. It was always the same pattern, always predictable, always quick. But something was wrong. Humans weren't running or screaming. Instead, they were gathering in the streets, pointing up at his ships, and taking pictures with their small devices.
Some are even waving.
Commander Vextal had never seen anything like it in his 30 years of conquest. His communication officer activated the planetary RadSec system. The message was simple and direct, translated into every human language. People of Earth, you have 72 hours to surrender unconditionally to the hegemony. Refuse, and your world will be destroyed. This is your only warning, Commander. Vextal expected immediate chaos. Instead, he watched as humans began gathering in larger groups, chattering excitedly among themselves. Many were pointing at his ships with what looked like enthusiasm rather than terror, down in the South Korean Defense Ministry. Colonel Kim Dae-ho watched the alien broadcast on the main screen. The translation was clear enough. Surrender or die. Pretty straightforward as ultimatums went. He had seen similar threats in old war movies, though those usually came from other humans, not aliens from space. The command center buzzed with activity as officers tried to figure out what to do next. Some suggested immediate military mobilization. Others recommended trying to contact other world leaders. A few even suggested hiding in bunkers. Lieutenant Park Min-ho, Dae-ho's young aide, approached his commander's desk with obvious nervousness. His hands shook slightly as he saluted. Sir, the president is on the line. He wants to know how we should respond to the alien ultimatum. Dae-ho leaned back in his chair and thought for a moment. In his 20 years of military service, he had faced many crises, but none quite like this. Alien invasion was definitely not covered in the standard military handbook. He looked at the screen showing crowds of curious humans gathering around the alien ships. Tell the president we're ordering. Pizza, Dae-ho said calmly. This is going to be a long night, and we need to think clearly. Can't think on an empty stomach. Lieutenant Park Min-ho stared at his commander, wondering if the stress had finally gotten to him. Sir, did you say pizza? That's right. Get enough. For everyone in the building, and maybe some chicken too, we're going to need our energy for whatever comes next. Across the city at Seoul National University, Dr. Lee So-young was having a completely different reaction. As Korea's leading expert on the possibility of alien life, she had spent years studying the question of whether humans were alone in the universe. She had her answer, and she could barely contain her excitement. This is incredible, she shouted to her research team, pacing around her lab like a caged tiger. Do you understand what this means? We're not alone. There's intelligent life out there, and it found us. Her laboratory was chaos. Graduate students ran between computers, trying to record every detail of the alien ships. Research assistants frantically searched through databases, looking for any similar encounters in history. Everyone was talking at once, sharing theories and observations. Dr. Choi Ho-yen-woo, her longtime research partner, looked up from his computer, where he was already writing grant proposals for alien contact research. So-young, shouldn't we be more worried about the whole surrender or die part of their message? Dr. Lee So-young waved her hand dismissively. Details. Yes, they're threatening us. But think about what this means scientifically. They have faster-than-light travel, advanced communication systems, and some kind of organized society. They're here, they're talking to us, and they obviously have technology we can't even imagine. She grabbed a marker and started drawing on the whiteboard. Look at the size of those ships. The engineering required to build something that big and make it fly between stars. The energy systems alone must be incredibly advanced, and they translated their message into every human language instantly. That means they've been studying us. But they want us to surrender, Dr. Choi pointed out practically. So what? First contact scenario has complications. This is the greatest day in human history, and we're going to document every second of it. Meanwhile, up in the alien flagship, Commander Vextel was growing increasingly confused. His conquest manual clearly stated that primitive species would respond to overwhelming force with immediate submission. The humans were definitely primitive compared to the hegemony, but they weren't acting like it. So his communications officer reported, "We're detecting massive increases in human communication activity. They appear to be sharing images and information about our ships across their global network. Are they coordinating their defenses?" Commander Vextel asked. "No, sir. They seem to be celebrating." Commander Vextel had conquered worlds full of warriors who fought to the death. He had faced civilizations that tried to negotiate or bargain. He had even encountered species that simply fled their homeworlds rather than submit. But he had never met a species that responded to invasion with a party 20-4 hours after the alien ultimatum. Commander Vextel expected to see military preparations, panicked evacuations, or desperate attempts at communication. Instead, he watched human news broadcasts that treated his invasion fleet like the arrival of a traveling circus. The news anchors smiled as they reported on the historic first contact event and discussed what it might mean for humanity's future. The thing that confused him most was something humans called memes. Within hours of his ultimatum, humans had created thousands of images and videos making fun of his threat. Showed his massive warship with the caption, showed his massive warship with where we and why where we and where we were we so why we shy Another featured a cartoon alien looking confused with text reading instructions unclear. Humans brought snacks. His intelligence officer tried to explain. "Sir, they appear to use humor as a coping mechanism. Instead of fear, they're responding." With entertainment, Commander Vextel had studied the psychology of conquest for decades. Fear was supposed to lead to submission. Humor was not supposed to be part of the equation at all. These humans were rewriting everything he thought he knew about intelligent species, down on Earth. President Yoon Jae-soon prepared for what might be the most important speech in human history. His advisors had suggested various approaches.
Some
wanted him to project strength and defiance. Others recommended immediate negotiation. A few even suggested preemptive surrender to save lives. But President Yoon had a different idea. He had spent the previous night reading reports from sociologists and anthropologists about first contact scenarios. Consensus was clear. Every successful diplomatic encounter in human history had begun with hospitality. Standing in the Blue House press room, President Yoon addressed not just his nation, but the entire world. His voice was calm and steady, the tone of a man welcoming guests rather than facing invaders. "My fellow Koreans and people of Earth," he began, "today we face something unprecedented in human history. We have been contacted by intelligent life from beyond our world. Yes, they have made demands. Yes, they have threatened us. Have also given us an opportunity." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "We welcome our visitors from the stars. However, before we discuss anything as serious as surrender, we would like to invite them to experience human hospitality. We would like to discuss terms over a proper meal. What do our guests prefer to eat? The speech sent shockwaves through the international community. Some world leaders called it brilliant diplomacy. Others called it insane. But across the globe, ordinary people began responding in ways that surprised everyone in the streets of Seoul. The response was immediate and practical. Park Ji-min, who ran a popular street food stall near Hongdae, was setting up her cart with a hastily painted sign reading, "Alien Welcome Party, Universal Flavors." She had been cooking Korean street food for 15 years, and she saw this. As just another catering challenge, a KBS News crew found her preparing twice her usual amount of food. "Are you really expecting aliens to eat Korean street food?" the reporter asked. Park Ji-min looked up from her grill where she was preparing bulgogi and kimchi pancakes. "Listen, if they traveled all this way across space, they must be hungry. I don't care if you're human or alien. Nobody makes good decisions on an empty stomach. Besides, Korean food is the best in the universe. It's time to prove it." Other vendors quickly followed her lead. Kim Tae-woo, who sold hotteok near the university, painted "Welcome Space Friends" on his cart. Lee Min-young, famous for her tteokbokki, started experimenting with milder recipes in case aliens couldn't handle spicy food. The scene was repeated across the city. Food trucks appeared with space-themed decorations. Restaurants offered first contact specials. Someone even started selling t-shirts with Korean and alien flag designs. Though nobody knew what the alien flag looked like yet, up in the alien flagship, Lieutenant Zephyrin monitored the human communications networks with growing amazement. "Sir, they're organizing parties. Actual parties." In response to our ultimatum, Commander Vextel studied the intelligence reports. Humans were gathering in public spaces, sharing food, and creating what they called festivals. Musicians were volunteering to perform. Artists were painting murals. Children were making drawings of spaceships and aliens holding hands with humans. "They're not afraid," he muttered to himself. "How do you conquer a species that isn't afraid, Lieutenant?" Zephyron pulled up more data on his screen. "Sir, their global communication network is filled with messages of welcome. They're asking questions about our culture, our food, our music. They seem genuinely curious about us." Commander Vextal had conquered warrior races that fought with honor. He had defeated technological civilizations that tried to bargain with advanced weapons. He'd even faced species that attempted to hide or flee. But he had never encountered a species that responded to invasion with invitation. "They're either the bravest species in the galaxy," he said slowly, "or the most foolish." "Are your orders, sir?" Commander Vextel stared at the feeds showing humans preparing food and decorating their cities with welcome signs. His conquest manual had no chapter on this scenario. For 47 worlds, the hegemony had used the same strategy. Show up with massive ships, make impossible demands, wait for the fear to set in, then accept surrender. It had worked perfectly every single time. Warriors would fight briefly before giving up. Advanced civilizations would try to negotiate before realizing they had no choice. Peaceful species would surrender immediately to avoid bloodshed. The pattern was so reliable that the hegemony had written official manuals about it. Earth was completely different. Instead of following the script, humans were improvising their own story. It made no sense to anyone in the hegemony fleet. Dr. Kim? Tae-young had spent his career studying how different cultures interact with each other. He specialized in first contact scenarios, though he had always assumed those would be between human civilizations, not actual aliens. When the UN emergency session convened, he found himself promoted from university professor to Earth's primary expert on alien relations in less than 24 hours. "The pattern is actually quite clear," he explained to the assembled world leaders via video conference. "The aliens are following what we call a classic dominance display. They show overwhelming force, make impossible demands, and expect immediate submission. It's like a gorilla beating its chest to show dominance." The Secretary General of the UN leaned forward. "But they have the power to destroy us. Why aren't we more afraid?" Dr. Kim adjusted his glasses and smiled, because they've never encountered a species that responds to threats with hospitality. In human culture, when someone shows up at your door making demands, You invite them in for tea and try to understand what they really want. We don't see this as conquest. We see it as the ultimate cultural exchange opportunity. Images from around the world on his laptop. Look at these responses. In Seoul, they're organizing food festivals. In New York, Broadway performers are creating welcome songs. In London, they're planning traditional afternoon tea for aliens. We're not responding as a military threat. We're responding as hosts, welcoming very rude guests. Meanwhile, those festivals were growing larger by the hour. Lee Jong-soo had been planning corporate events and weddings for 10 years. But nothing had prepared him for organizing humanity's first alien welcome party. His phone hadn't stopped ringing since he volunteered to coordinate Seoul's first contact. Festival. This is insane, he told his assistant while juggling 3 phone calls. We've got BTS offering to perform a special welcome concert. Every food truck in the city wants to participate. Seoul Philharmonic wants to play classical music. The traditional dancers from the cultural center are preparing special performances. And somehow the military band got involved and wants to play welcome songs? His assistant looked overwhelmed. How many people are we expecting? Conservative. Estimate, half the city. Maybe more. People are flying in from other countries just to be here. I've never seen anything like it. The festival wasn't just happening in Seoul. Similar events were spontaneously organizing in every major city on Earth. In Tokyo, they were preparing traditional tea ceremonies scaled up for thousands of participants. In Mumbai, Bollywood dancers were creating alien-themed performances. In Rio, they were planning the biggest street party in Brazilian history. What confused the aliens most was that these weren't government-organized events. They were happening because ordinary people wanted them to happen. Humans were using their vacation days, spending their own money, and volunteering their time to welcome beings who had just threatened to destroy their planet. Commander Vextel watched the growing celebrations with increasing frustration. His ship's sensors detected the massive gatherings, the stages being built, the food preparation areas being set up. It looked like the humans were preparing for war, except instead of weapons, they were bringing musical instruments and cooking equipment. They're not afraid, he muttered to Lieutenant Zephron. In 30 years of conquest, I've never seen a species that wasn't afraid. Fear is supposed to lead to submission. How do you conquer a species that isn't afraid? Lieutenant Zephron studied. The surveillance feeds from the human celebrations. Children were drawing pictures of aliens and humans playing together. Musicians were composing welcome songs in languages they didn't even speak. Artists were painting murals showing spaceships, surrounded by flowers. Sir, he said slowly, I think they're trying to befriend us. The concept was so completely foreign to hegemony thinking that Commander Vextel had no reference point for it. The hegemony had allies, but those relationships were based on mutual benefit and shared military strength. It had subjects who provided resources and obedience. They had enemies who were either defeated or avoided, but friendship, the idea of forming connections based on mutual enjoyment and shared experiences, that concept simply didn't exist in hegemony culture. Befriend us, Commander Vextel repeated the words as if they were in a foreign language. We just threatened to destroy their planet. Yes, sir. And they invited us to dinner. Stared at the screens, showing humans preparing elaborate welcome celebrations. His training told him this was either an elaborate trap or a sign of complete insanity. But the intelligence reports were clear. The humans weren't preparing weapons. They were preparing gifts, food, and entertainment. What do we do with a species that treats invasion as a social opportunity? He asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Ambassador Kim Soo-jin had represented South Korea at the United Nations for 8 years, but she had never given a speech quite like this one. Standing before the General Assembly, she looked out at delegates from every nation on Earth, all waiting to hear humanity's official response to an alien invasion threat. Honorable delegates, she began, her voice steady despite the unprecedented situation. 3 days ago, we received an ultimatum from beings we have never met. They demand our surrender based on nothing more than superior firepower. But in Korean culture, we have an old saying, even enemies can become friends over a shared meal. She paused, letting the words sink in. I propose we invite the hegemony to join us for a feast of peace, not as conquerors and conquered, but as neighbors meeting for the first time. Let us show them what humanity has to offer beyond fear and submission. The proposal sent shockwaves through the assembly. Some delegates whispered frantically to their advisors. Others sat in stunned silence. A few actually smiled, understanding the brilliant simplicity of the idea. The Japanese delegates stood up. Ambassador Kim, you're suggesting we treat an invasion as a dinner party? I'm suggesting we treat first contact as an opportunity for understanding, she replied. Every successful negotiation in human history has begun with people sitting down together and sharing food. Why should this be different? The proposal was transmitted to the hegemony fleet within hours. It's translated into their language by the same systems they had used to deliver their ultimatum. The response it provoked was unlike anything in their military history. Commander, Bextel read the message 3 times before calling his senior staff. They want to feed us, he announced to his officers. The humans want to prepare a feast and invite us to attend. His tactical officer looked confused. Is this some kind of trap, sir? I don't think so, Bextel replied slowly. Their message includes detailed questions about our dietary requirements, allergies, and cultural preferences. They seem genuinely concerned about our comfort. The situation created an impossible dilemma. Hegemony honor codes developed over centuries of military tradition had very specific rules about hospitality. When offered food and shelter, honor demanded acknowledgement. Refusing hospitality was considered deeply insulting and could justify retaliation, but accepting would completely undermine their position of strength. How could they maintain an image of terrifying conquerors while sitting down to eat with their intended victims? Down on Earth, preparations began immediately. Jeff Young-ha-Newell, whose restaurant had served 3 presidents and countless celebrities, found herself facing the ultimate catering challenge. When reporters asked if she was nervous about cooking for aliens, she laughed. I fed presidents and kings, she told the assembled media outside her restaurant. I've catered for diplomats with impossible dietary restrictions and celebrities. With ridiculous demands, how hard can aliens be? But privately, she was terrified. Not of the aliens themselves, but of the responsibility. If she accidentally poisoned Earth's first alien guests, it would probably start an interstellar war. The pressure was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Dr. Yoon Sang-min, one of Korea's leading nutritionists, assembled an emergency team of biochemists, food scientists, and medical researchers. Their mission was to figure out what the aliens could safely eat without knowing anything about their biology. We need to assume completely different biochemistry, he explained to his team during their first meeting. What's nutritious for humans might be toxic for them. What's harmless for us might be deadly for them. The last thing we want is to accidentally poison our guests. They worked around the clock, developing test procedures and safety protocols. They prepared multiple versions of every dish, analyzed molecular structures, and created emergency medical responses for every possible scenario. Back on the Hegemony flagship, Commander Vextal faced the most difficult decision of his career. His officers waited for orders, but he had no precedent to follow. The military manual had chapters on siege warfare, space battles, and occupation procedures. It had nothing about dinner invitations from species you were trying to conquer. Sir, Lieutenant Zephron said carefully, the humans are still waiting for our response. They've prepared a location and are asking for our dietary requirements. Vextal stared at the planet below, where humans continued their festival preparations. He could see the massive gathering areas, the stages being built, the food preparation sites. It was the largest peaceful gathering in human history, and it was all for them. We'll send a small delegation, he announced finally, to assess their surrender feast. His officers exchanged worried glances. This was completely outside normal conquest procedures. Several of them looked like they wanted to object, but nobody dared question their commander directly. How many delegates, sir? His communications officer asked. 12, a ceremonial number. We'll attend their feast, accept their surrender, and complete the conquest according to protocol. But even as he said the words, Commander Vextal knew this wasn't going to be a normal surrender. The humans had already proven they didn't follow normal patterns. He had no idea what to expect when his delegation sat down to eat with them. Seoul's Olympic Stadium had hosted many historic events, but nothing quite like this. The massive arena had been transformed into the largest dining hall in human history, with tables stretching across the entire field. Representatives from every nation on Earth had brought their finest dishes, creating a feast that showcased the incredible diversity of human cuisine. Celebrity chef Baek Jong-won stood at the center of it all, coordinating what he called the most important meal in human history. His team had worked for 72 hours straight, preparing dishes that would be safe for alien consumption while still representing the best of human cooking. The smell of hundreds of different foods filled the air: Korean barbecue, Italian pasta, Indian curry, Mexican tacos, and countless other dishes from every corner of the globe. When Commander Vextel's delegation entered the stadium, Vextel greeted with applause rather than the fearful silence they usually encountered. 12 aliens walked stiffly down the center aisle, their metallic uniforms gleaming under the stadium lights. They had never been welcomed anywhere before, and the experience was deeply unsettling. At the head table, the alien delegation sat, like statues, unsure how to react to the warm hospitality surrounding them. The humans had somehow analyzed their biochemistry and created food that was not only safe for them to eat, but actually tasted good. It was a scientific achievement that impressed even these hardened military officers who had seen the technology. Of dozens of worlds, Dr. Shin Dajin, a sociologist who specialized in conflict resolution, had volunteered to sit beside Lieutenant Zephron. She had spent her career studying why groups fight and how they can find peace instead. As the evening progressed, she gently asked questions about the hegemony's history, their motivations, and their goals. "You've conquered many worlds," she observed quietly. "But you don't seem to enjoy it. There's sadness in your eyes when you talk about your victories." Lieutenant Zephron had been trained to never reveal strategic information to enemies. But something about the warm atmosphere and genuine concern in the human's voice made him let his guard down. "Our homeworld is dying," he admitted before he could stop himself. "We're not really conquerors. We're refugees running from extinction." The confession hung in the air between them. Dr. Shin nodded with understanding rather than judgment. "Tell me about the star plague," she said gently. "It's been consuming solar systems for generations," Zephron continued, surprised by his own honesty. "Entire civilizations have been wiped out, we thought. We thought strength was the only way to survive. If we could build a strong enough empire, gather enough resources, maybe we could find a way to stop it." Across the table, engineer Lim Dong-wook had been listening to the conversation. As someone who had spent his career solving complex problems, he was fascinated by the challenge the aliens described. "We've faced extinction threats too," he said, leaning forward with interest. "Climate change, resource depletion, pandemic diseases. But we found that cooperation works better than conquest." He pulled out his tablet and showed images of renewable energy projects, international climate agreements, and collaborative research efforts. "When we work together, we can solve problems that would be impossible for any single nation to handle alone." Lieutenant Zephron studied the images with growing amazement. "You share technology freely, even with your enemies?" "We don't really have enemies anymore," Lim explained. "We have competitors, sure, and we disagree about lots of things. But when the whole planet is threatened, we all work together. It's the only way to survive." At the center of the head table, Commander Vextel found himself in the most unusual conversation of his military career. President Yoon was asking detailed questions about terraforming technology and sustainable development. Not as a defeated leader begging for mercy, but as a colleague interested in solving mutual problems. "Your ships must have incredible energy systems," President Yoon observed. "Have you ever considered using that technology for planetary restoration instead of conquest?" Commander Vextel was taken aback. In 47 conquests, no defeated species had ever asked about his technology for anything other than weapons. "We use it to power our fleet, to maintain life support across multiple worlds." "But imagine if you used it to heal damaged planets instead of claiming new ones," President Yoon continued. "You could restore worlds that have been damaged by this. Star plague, you mentioned. Create sustainable colonies that could last for thousands of years. The idea was revolutionary to the hegemony mindset. It always thought in terms of taking what they needed from others. The concept of creating abundance through cooperation was completely foreign to them. Around the table, similar conversations were happening. Human scientists were sharing research with alien engineers. Doctors were discussing medical techniques. Artists were showing their work to curious alien observers. What had started as a formal diplomatic dinner was becoming a genuine exchange of knowledge and ideas. Commander Vextall looked around the stadium, watching his officers engaged in animated discussions with humans. For the first time in decades, they looked relaxed, even happy. It was a side of his people he had almost forgotten existed. "We may have been approaching this problem all wrong," he admitted quietly to President Yoon. The formal dinner was supposed to last 3 hours. Instead, it stretched into 3 days, then a full week. What had begun as a diplomatic formality became something neither species had expected: a genuine exchange of knowledge, culture, and friendship. Commander Vextall found himself extending his delegation's stay for the first time in his military career. His officers, initially uncomfortable with the prolonged contact, were now actively participating in workshops and research sessions with human scientists. The conquest schedule was completely forgotten, as both species discovered they had much to learn from each other. Dr. Kang Myung, Korea's leading climatologist, had spent her career studying how to reverse environmental damage. When she learned about the hegemony's dying homeworld, she immediately volunteered to help. Working alongside alien environmental specialists, she spread detailed atmospheric readings and pollution data across her laboratory tables. "Look at these numbers," she said excitedly to the hegemony science team. "Your planet's atmospheric composition is actually reversible. The damage looks severe, but we faced similar challenges on Earth 50 years ago. Air pollution, greenhouse gases, toxic water systems. We figured out how to fix all of it." She pulled up satellite images of Earth from different decades, showing the dramatic improvement in air quality over major cities. Seoul used to have some of the worst air pollution in the world. Now look at it. We developed technologies that can clean the atmosphere while generating clean energy at the same time. The alien scientists studied the data with growing amazement. They had assumed their homeworld was beyond saving, that conquest was their only option for survival. The idea that damaged planets could be healed was revolutionary to their thinking. Meanwhile, human scientists were equally fascinated by hegemony technology. Dr. Nam Hyun-soo, medical researcher, spent hours studying alien healing devices that could repair tissue damage in minutes instead of weeks. "This could revolutionize human medicine," he told his research team. "Imagine being able to heal heart attacks, cure cancer, repair spinal injuries instantly." The technology exchange wasn't limited to serious scientific matters. Human engineers were amazed by hegemony star navigation systems that could plot courses across the galaxy with perfect accuracy. The aliens had developed methods for traveling between stars that opened up incredible possibilities for human space exploration. "We've been struggling to reach Mars reliably," admitted aerospace engineer Kim Jae-won. "You figured out how to travel between star systems like we drive between cities. This could change everything for human space travel." In the stadium's makeshift kitchens, an unexpected collaboration was taking place. Chef Park Soon-had volunteered to create meals that both species could enjoy together. Working with alien dietary specialists, he began experimenting with fusion cuisine that combined Korean cooking techniques with hegemony nutritional requirements. "This is incredible," he told reporters while preparing a dish that looked like bulgogi but was made from proteins that aliens could digest. "I'm accidentally inventing an entirely new type of cooking, Korean alien fusion cuisine. My grandmother would never believe it." The dishes were surprisingly delicious. Both humans and aliens found themselves enjoying meals that neither species could have imagined a week earlier. Food became a bridge between cultures, just as the humans had hoped it would. But perhaps the most unexpected development was the cultural exchange happening in the stadium's entertainment area. Korean comedians, musicians, and performers had volunteered to show aliens what human entertainment looked like. The results were hilarious and heartwarming. Commander Vextall found himself actually laughing at comedian Kim Byung-man's stand-up routine about the absurdity of interstellar warfare. The comedian joked about aliens traveling millions of miles just to demand surrender, only to end up arguing about who would pay for dinner. Your species finds humor in everything, Commander Vextel observed to Ambassador Kim Soo-jin during a break between performances. Even in situations that should be terrifying, you make jokes. Ambassador Kim smiled. It's how we survive. When everything seems hopeless, we make jokes and share food. It reminds us that we're not alone, that we can get through anything if we stick together. The concept was completely foreign to hegemony culture. It always believed that strength came from fear, that survival required domination. The idea that joy and laughter could be sources of strength was revolutionary to their entire worldview. We've spent centuries believing that we had to be strong to survive, Commander Vextal admitted. But you're showing us that maybe we had it backwards. Maybe survival comes from connection, not conquest. As the days passed, the line between hosts and guests began to blur. Humans and aliens worked together on research projects, shared meals, and even played games together. The invasion had accidentally become the greatest cultural exchange in human history. Both species were learning that they had more in common than they had differences. They both faced extinction threats. Both struggled with resource limitations. And both wanted to ensure their people's survival. The difference was in their approach, one through conquest, the other through cooperation. The celebration in Seoul's Olympic Stadium came to an abrupt halt when every alarm system on both human and alien technology began screaming at the same time. The cheerful sounds of music and laughter were replaced by harsh warning signals that made everyone's blood run cold. Dr. Oh Seung-hwan was monitoring communication signals from his mobile laboratory when his equipment detected something that made him freeze with terror. The approaching ships weren't broadcasting conquest, ultimatums, or diplomatic messages. They were sending out feeding signals, the kind of transmissions that predators use to coordinate hunting. "Commander Vextel," he called out, his voice shaking. "Need to see this immediately. The ships approaching Earth aren't here to conquer. They're here to consume everything." Commander Vextel looked at the detection readings, and his face went completely pale. His hands actually trembled as he recognized the signature patterns. "Devourers," he whispered, using the hegemony word for the most feared species in the galaxy. "They found us." The atmosphere in the stadium changed instantly. The warm fellowship of the past week was replaced by cold fear as both humans and aliens realized they were facing something far worse than invasion. The approaching fleet belonged to the consuming swarm, species that didn't just conquer planets, they literally ate them, devouring every living thing and every resource until nothing remained but empty space. Lieutenant Zephron, who had spent the week laughing with human comedians and sharing meals with Korean families, suddenly looked like a frightened child. The confession came pouring out of him in a desperate rush. "We've been running from them for decades," he admitted to the assembled humans. "Every world we conquered, every resource we gathered, every alliance we forced, it was all preparation. For this fight, we thought if we could build a strong enough empire, gather enough weapons and ships and soldiers, maybe we could finally face them and win." Dr. Kim Tae-young, the anthropologist who had become Earth's alien relations expert, suddenly understood everything. "You weren't expanding for conquest," he said quietly. "We're trying to build an army. We're preparing for war against something that terrifies even you." Commander Vextel nodded grimly. "The consuming swarm has destroyed entire star systems. They don't take prisoners. They don't negotiate. They don't even communicate beyond coordination signals. They just consume everything in their path and move on to the next target." General Ru Jae-min, who had been quietly observing the conversation, stepped forward. As South Korea's top military strategist, he had spent his career analyzing threats and developing defense strategies. "You thought you had to face them alone," he said firmly. "But you don't. Not anymore." The words hung in the air as their meaning sank in. Humans and aliens looked at each other with new understanding. The week of cultural exchange had created something neither species had expected: genuine friendship and mutual respect. President Yoon stood before the combined human hegemony leadership, looking out at faces that had become familiar over the past week. Korean scientists sat next to alien engineers. Human military officers stood beside hegemony tactical specialists. Children who had been drawing pictures of spaceships were now holding hands with young aliens they considered friends. "We've faced extinction before," he said, his voice carrying across the stadium. "Climate change, nuclear war, pandemic diseases, resource depletion. Each time we thought we had to face these threats separately as individual nations. But we learned that cooperation makes us stronger than any single country could be alone." He paused, looking directly at Commander Vextal. "This time, we face extinction together. Not as conquerors and conquered, not as superior and inferior species, but as allies, as friends." The hegemony delegates stared in amazement. These humans were offering to fight beside them against the most terrifying threat in the galaxy. As subjects forced to serve, but as equals choosing to stand together? "You would risk your entire species for us?" Commander Vextal asked, unable to hide his astonishment. "We would risk our species with you," President Yoon corrected. "There's a difference. We're not doing this for you. We're doing this with you. Because we're stronger together than apart." Concept was revolutionary to the hegemony mindset. They had always believed that strength came from dominance, that survival required forcing others to serve. The idea that voluntary cooperation could be more powerful than conquest was completely foreign to their experience. But as they looked around the stadium at the faces of humans and aliens who had become genuine friends over the past week, they began to understand what these humans had discovered. True strength didn't come from fear or domination. It came from people choosing to stand together because they cared about each other. The consuming swarm was approaching, bringing certain death to both species. But for the first time in decades, the hegemony wouldn't face them alone. The preparation for humanity's first interstellar war began exactly as you would expect from humans with a party. Defense Coordinator Song Min-jae, who would organize corporate team-building events before the alien arrival, found himself managing what he called victory prep parties across the globe. "We need to build weapons, shields, and defensive systems." He announced 2 volunteers gathering in converted factories and warehouses. "But we also need to keep our spirits up. So we're going to do both at the same time." The scenes were unlike anything in military history. In Seoul, volunteers assembled weapon components, while Korean traditional music played in the background. Food trucks lined up outside weapons factories, serving free meals to anyone helping with the war effort. Children drew encouraging messages on missile casings, while their parents worked on targeting systems. "This is insane," muttered Lieutenant Zephron, as he watched humans singing folk songs while building plasma cannons. "How can they be so happy when we're facing extinction?" But the human approach was producing incredible results. The fusion of human creativity and hegemony technology created weapons and defenses that neither species could have developed alone. Dr. Kim Woo-jen, working alongside alien engineers, had developed shield systems that could protect entire continents. Using a combination of human renewable energy technology and hegemony force field generators, the key was thinking about defense differently, he explained to the joint research team. "We were trying to build walls strong enough to stop anything. We focused on building systems that could bend without breaking, absorb energy, and redirect. It, like martial arts, but for planetary defense." In the skies above Earth, an equally remarkable transformation was taking place. Captain Lee Hae-ri, one of Korea's best fighter pilots, was training alongside alien pilots in combat techniques that blended human unpredictability with hegemony precision. "Human pilots are chaotic," observed her alien training partner. "You don't follow standard attack patterns." "That's because we make it up as we go," Lee replied cheerfully. "Standard patterns are predictable. Predictable gets you killed. We prefer creative improvisation." The training sessions were intense, but surprisingly enjoyable. Human pilots taught aliens how to think outside the box, while alien pilots shared centuries of combat experience and advanced maneuvering techniques. The result was a new style of space combat that combined the best of both species, Commander. Vextal found himself commanding a truly integrated fleet for the first time in his career. Human and alien crews worked side by side on ships that were hybrids of both technologies. The command structure was unlike anything in hegemony military doctrine. With humans and aliens serving as equals rather than conquerors and subjects, Your people fight like they celebrate, he observed to Admiral Park Taeyong during a strategy meeting. With joy, even in the face of death, Admiral Park smiled. Fear makes you stupid. Hope makes you clever. When people are afraid, they make bad decisions, freeze up, or panic. When they have hope, they find creative solutions to impossible problems. The philosophy was completely foreign to hegemony military thinking, but the results spoke for themselves. The combined fleet, preparing to face the consuming swarm, was more innovative, more adaptable, and more motivated than anything either species had ever fielded on the ships themselves. The integration was remarkable. Human crews shared their rations with hegemony soldiers. While alien technology enhanced human ships beyond their original capabilities, the language barriers had largely disappeared as both species learned to communicate through shared purpose and mutual respect. Perhaps most impressive was the work of Chef Yang Sejong, who had somehow managed to create combat rations that both species actually enjoyed. The meal packets contained foods that were nutritious for both human and alien biochemistry, but actually tasted good instead of like cardboard. This is better than our regular food, admitted one hegemony soldier while eating Yang's creation. How did you make military rations taste like a celebration? Same way we're fighting this war, Yang replied with a grin. With love instead of fear, creativity instead of routine, and the belief that good things are possible even in bad situations. The approach was working. Morale was high, innovation was constant, and the combined fleet was ready to face an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for generations. Humans and aliens had discovered something neither species had expected. They were stronger together than either could be alone. The consuming swarm was approaching. Certain destruction, but they would face an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. Two species who had chosen to stand together not out of fear, but out of friendship, hope, and the uniquely human belief that sharing a meal can solve almost any problem. The battle that would decide the fate of two civilizations lasted only 6 hours, but it changed the course of galactic history forever. The consuming swarm arrived at Earth expecting to face another desperate, isolated species fighting alone for survival. Instead, they encountered something completely unprecedented. Two different species working together with perfect coordination. The combined human hegemony fleet moved like a single organism. Human pilots used their unpredictable tactics to confuse the enemy, while hegemony weapons delivered devastating precision strikes. When the swarm tried to adapt to human creativity, they were met with alien military discipline. When they adjusted to hegemony patterns, human improvisation caught them off guard. Captain Lee Hari, flying a hybrid fighter that combined human design with alien technology, led the decisive attack. This is for everyone who ever shared a meal with a stranger. She radioed to her mixed squadron of human and alien pilots as they broke through the enemy's defenses. The consuming swarm, accustomed to overwhelming isolated worlds through sheer numbers, found themselves completely outmaneuvered. They had never faced an enemy that fought with joy instead of desperation, with hope instead of fear. The cooperation between two species was so seamless that it seemed almost like magic. When the last enemy ship retreated into deep space, the combined fleet erupted in celebration. On the command bridge, Commander Vextel and Admiral Park Tae-young embraced like old friends. Their species' ancient differences, forgotten in the moment of shared victory, the victory celebration that followed spanned 2 worlds and lasted for weeks. On Earth, Korean traditional drums echoed alongside hegemony honor songs in concerts that no one had ever imagined possible. The fusion of 2 completely different musical traditions created something beautiful and entirely new. Commander Vextel, now wearing a hanbok that Ambassador Kim had gifted him, stood before a crowd of humans and aliens in Seoul's Olympic Stadium. He raised a glass of soju, a drink he had learned to appreciate during their cultural exchange, and offered a toast that bridged to civilizations. "To the humans," he declared, his voice carrying across the stadium, who taught us that strength comes not from conquest, but from connection. who showed us that the universe is not a place of endless war, but a place of endless possibility. The celebration was more than just a victory party. It was the birth of a new kind of relationship between species, one based on mutual respect, shared goals, and genuine friendship. Dr. Lee So-young, the xenobiologist who had been excited about first contact from the very beginning, stood beside her new hegemony research partner, planning the next phase of their cooperation. "We're going to establish the first joint colony on your homeworld," she announced to the media. "We'll call it New Sol." The project would combine human environmental restoration techniques with hegemony technology to heal the aliens' dying planet. It would be a symbol of what two species could accomplish when they worked together instead of against each other. 1 year later, that symbol had become a thriving reality. New Sol was a city unlike anywhere else in the galaxy, where human farmers worked alongside hegemony engineers to restore a world that had been dying for generations. The streets were filled with the sounds of both languages, the smells of fusion cuisine, and the laughter of children from both species playing together. Street food vendors served Korean alien fusion dishes to mix crowds of humans and aliens, who had become neighbors and friends. The restaurants that had started as experiments during the first contact feast had evolved into an entirely new culinary tradition that both species loved. In the restored gardens, human children played traditional Korean games with young hegemony who had learned to appreciate the simple joy of friendship. The sight of different species choosing to spend time together had become so normal that no one thought it was unusual anymore. President Yoon's memorial address to the galaxy, broadcast to every known intelligent species, was characteristically simple and profound. When the universe gives you an ultimatum, sometimes the best response is to invite everyone for dinner. The message reached dozens of worlds carried by both human and hegemony ships working together as ambassadors of their new alliance. Other species, many of whom had been living in fear of various threats, began to consider whether cooperation might be more effective than isolation. The galaxy would never be the same. The age of conquest and fear was ending, replaced by an age of connection and shared meals. And it all started because humans responded to an invasion threat by asking what the aliens like to eat.